Well, thank you for coming today and listening to Ed and I give a presentation on Restore Our Creek Coalition and our effort to get the center of Butte, which is where Silverboat Creek runs from Texas Avenue to Montana Street, to get that cleaned up. And we wanted it cleaned up in terms of getting the tailings out and getting the creek restored. Having a creek just like there was there before mining ever occurred. Now, before we start, there's going to be some redundancy between Ed and I. He's going to give most of the PowerPoint, and I'll give a little bit of talking here. But we flipped a coin, and we both decided the good-looking one would talk first, and the one who's a better presenter would go second. So, yeah.
It was a two-headed coin.
So, but thanks again for showing up here. As you know about Butte, it is been numbers of decades that we've been having cleanup go around here. And we've got, I think initially that I heard numbers like 13 operable units and all sorts of groups and organizations and people being focused on that cleanup that was disparate and spread out across the entire community. And what we thought, some of the people that were in those organizations decided that, you know, it's time to get a coalition going that we can focus all that attention on something that we can really get the energy of the community behind and move this stuff forward. I mean, you look down the road a ways, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it, but I mean, the cleanup that took place west of Butte, just west of Butte, along Silverboat Creek, all the way down to really Milltown, was cleaned up, and that's 90 some miles. It was cleaned up all the way to Milltown, and they left the first mile yet to be done. And so that's the focus that our group, Restore Our Creek Coalition, came together to try and get something done. I got to mention one other thing. We, as a group, we're not going to focus on what has been done in Butte in the past. We wanted a positive message, and a message that could hopefully influence the outcome of things that were yet to be done. And the creek was yet to be done. And so we've been working on that. I got to also mention some of the other people. Bill Mcgregor back here. Bill, if you could raise your hand. He's a very adamant supporter of Restore Our Creek. I'm not sure if I can see anybody else in here. I don't have my glasses on. But so we started off after we got the coalition going in 2015 with the stroll along the creek. We got hundreds and hundreds of people included and involved in that to imagine what could happen there if the creek was restored and we had things that we could put there to be attractive for the community. We had fundraisers. We had, I mean, again, most of this was all nonprofits and volunteer work. And so we had to go out and gain some funds in order to do what we thought we needed to do. We gave presentations. We had public forums, and I know some of you guys might remember this, but the first public forum we had was at the Mining City Center, where we brought together the agencies and the PRPs, the potentially responsible parties. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, by court order, the things that were going on, the decision makers in this effort were held to secrecy. They were meeting and they were deciding the fate of our community in secret, based on court order. So we brought those agencies and those PRPs together to allow the community and the citizens of Butte to meet. And they presented, and the people of the community, there were hundreds and hundreds again of them, showing up, and they had an opportunity to let those agencies and the PRPs know what they thought was not going right and what was going right, and it was a very raucous occasion. So in 2016, we developed community workshops where we brought at several different occasions, we brought people from the community in by advertising and asked them to imagine what could be in the center of Butte. We had charrettes developed. We asked them, you know, what kind of amenities, what kind of activities, what kind of things would you like to see in the center of Butte? I mean, here it is, right in the heart of our community, from Texas Avenue, behind the Civic Center, all the way to Montana Street, right in the heart of the community. People that come to this town drive right by those areas all the time. So we asked people, what would you like to see there? And we had several hundred show up and in multiple occasions. And that same year we had the EPA Regional Administrator, Sean Mcgregor, show up. And he met with us and toured around Butte. But he did make an observation I think is very telling. He says, you know, he's looked at the cleanup that has taken place in Butte, and it doesn't look like it's very comprehensive. So when you think about all the operable units as separate and distinct cleanup sites that were being worked on for numbers of decades around here, it was hard to kind of create a comprehensive view of that stuff. He also said one other thing. He said, because he knew what we were up to. We were putting a vision document together that that actually would show what we thought should happen there based on the community's influence. He says, don't just stop with cleanup. Go all the way to end use. Make it comprehensive. So we did that, and that's what this document is. We hired a contractor from New York to come in here and spend months augmenting what we had started doing with the meetings on Imagine Butte, and we also went to the community. We went to neighborhoods. Remember that, Bill? We went to neighborhoods. We met individually with people in their neighborhoods. We not only had the public meetings, but we had neighborhood meetings on this stuff, and all of that information got put into this again too. So we, again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these discussions were taking place in confidential privacy without the public being involved. We thought this is a good way to take the bull by the horns and say, you know what, the public has a say in this too. And this book was the outcome of that public saying, this is what we want to see in Butte. So we presented that to the agencies and the PRPs again in November, and they were very accepting of it, but not necessarily endorsing it completely. We continued in 2017 with the meetings. We met one-on-one with almost every council member, with the chief executive and several of the staff. Regional Administrator Doug Benevento, the replacement for Sean Mcgregor, showed up here and met with us, toured the community, and shortly after released in a press release that Butte and Anaconda were among the largest Superfund sites in the country. We held a rally after he was here, invited him to come back. He couldn't make it, but if you remember the rally, we had the Covalite Theater where we invited business leaders from around the community. We had about 10, and a student from Butte High School who gave something very memorable in her presentation. But every business leader said how important the cleanup and the restoration of this creek was to the future economic welfare of this community and to the future health of this community. It was without a doubt a very powerful night, we thought. After that meeting, because Doug Benevento is an aggressive project manager, he wanted to get the final CD done and get this thing going till its final conclusion, because it's been going on for how many years? Decades. And we had heard this. Now we had the rally in November, and we had heard shortly after that rally that there was going to be an agreement in principle reached in January. And that agreement in principle was getting all of these people under the secret discussions that were going on to come together on some sort of fundamental agreement on what was going to have to happen in order for their agreement to come about and finish off what was going to happen with Butte priority soils, of which Butte Silver Bowl Creek is a portion of. So we said at that point in time, we still can't just rely on this. We got to be active in how we go about this. So we set about, with only a month to do it, a petition drive that says we want the tailings removed from along the creek, and we want a creek put back in place. And we got 3,500 signatures in the span of a month. We could have gotten tons more, but we needed to compile this information and get it ready so that it could be delivered to the people in the secret negotiations to let them know again, not just the document, but the people of Butte are very encouraged about getting them to hear what we have to say on this stuff. So we did that, and I'm almost done. But in January then, Doug Benevento, the regional administrator, shows up. And even though they couldn't delve into the details because of the confidentiality agreements, they did reveal a process and a schedule of what events would take place. But he was pressed and asked, okay, well, what is the basis for how these decisions are going to be made on the cleanup? And this made it in the front page of the Montana Standard, which was him holding up our document saying the decisions they're going to be making are going to be premised on trying to allow something like this to happen, which is very encouraging to us. This year has been a busy year, and there's a lot more taking place. Continual meetings and that stuff, but you know, we're going to keep pushing this along until we kind of get what we think we need to get for the community. With that, Ed, I'll turn it over to you.
I don't have anything else to say.
Yeah, yeah, you do.
We're going to show a short video, and then I'll continue on.
Most of us who live in Butte recognize the area in the distance where Blacktail Creek joins Silver Bow Creek, the Chamber of Commerce, and the KOA, the empty, undeveloped fields alongside the creek that trace George Street. We take for granted these empty, undeveloped acres. This is the way it's been since most of us can remember. And most of us lived with this situation without knowing about the toxic materials buried alongside this corridor. Tailings washed downstream from the historic Parrott Smelter, where the Civic Center now stands. After all, it looks like green fields. Sort of. We also take for granted the Arrow Street ditch that we know is Silver Bow Creek, but that looks like what it has been made to be, an engineered waste collection system that's lined with grasses and water that can sometimes be seen. But it's not inviting, not attractive, and not the sort of mountain stream it once was. When we view this area from above, the way waterfall traversing the corridor see it, we quickly recognize how different barren fields are from the rest of the creek, just a few miles downstream. We can't help but imagine what this area could become if it were restored to a more natural riparian state. But before we can let our imaginations carry us away, we need to take the first step. The toxic mine waste covering this corridor, beginning east of the Civic Center and extending west to the Chamber of Commerce, need to be removed. The same remedy that has been applied by Superfund all along the length of Silver Bow Creek downstream to Missoula needs to apply here in Butte. Take out the source of the contaminants. Remove the Parrott tailings, the Northside tailings, and diggings east. This whole area at the heart of Butte begs for development, for open green spaces, as well as residential or commercial development that takes advantage of both the natural attractiveness of the riparian environment and the central location midway between Butte's Uptown and the Flats. Butte deserves to have a more fully protective remedy under Superfund of the sort that communities downstream from Rocker to Missoula have received. Butte residents deserve an attractive, welcoming green space along the creek corridor. Butte businesses deserve the opportunity to develop appropriate commercial enterprises here that take advantage of the location between uptown and downtown. It's time to imagine what we could have, what we should have, when Superfund leaves town sometime in the future. We don't have to settle for empty fields where blue bones can be found that have soaked up copper from the contaminants in the groundwater. Reflect what we might have there instead. Imagine what sorts of developments and future uses that might be most fitting here. Ponds, parkways, multifamily residential use, attractions to visitors. Consider how much more a full restoration of Silver Bow Creek could accomplish in this central location. Imagine what a restored Silver Bow Creek in the heart of Butte could do for all of us. The possibilities are endless, and the choice is ours. This matter affects all of Butte, its residents, its public institutions, its businesses, and all of us need to step up and join our voices. Remove the Parrott tailings and their downstream residue. Restore our creek. Give us back the waters that once shone like silver in the sun, winding through this beautiful valley.
Okay, next please. As Northey mentioned, we started back in July, really, of 2015, coming together as a group to try to bring some effort to get these tailings out and the creek restored. The coalition allowed us to speak, as it says here, for a much broader range of community. And you should consider this a community-based effort to get something done with the government. Next, please. We also, with the negotiators, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Superfund efforts, but the principal parties here in Butte are Butte Silver Bow, ARCO, the state of Montana, and I'm forgetting what's the important one.
Or EPA.
EPA is the other one. But we were able to get in and be able to talk with them on a one-on-one basis, which really helped eliminate some of the middleman type of syndrome that you normally see in this sort of effort. And we do believe that we can restore this corridor and make it a benefit and a development asset for Butte. Next, please. So why are we doing this? I will show you a map in a minute, but right up here is where the current Civic Center sits. And you probably read that the Parrot tailings are being removed. It was the site of a smelter. There are some people who said that there is groundwater contamination, and some people say this is the extent of it, and other state agencies say this is the extent of it. It goes through the whole corridor. So we are trying to do this to get those tailings removed and the groundwater eventually to be cleaned up. Next, please. So through, as Northey said, we had many meetings. We had over 16 that I can count, and we asked the people what they'd like to see, and they posted all kinds of things on boards and written comments, and we asked the consultant to compile those and to really put together some guiding principles as to how they would approach, the contractor would approach putting those ideas to work. So these guiding principles basically is an ecological restoration of the Silver Bow Creek corridor, a phased restoration process, and the use of the corridor and connectivity with the rest of the trails and bus systems around, recreational spaces, user support services, kiosks, equipment rentals, etc. Cultural programs could be part of it, educational resources, and of course, important to us is wetlands and riparian areas. Next, please. So there, I don't know, Robert, do you have copies of this book? No. No. Well, we'll have to get you a couple, but I don't plan to go through all the maps, but let me orient you here. This is a large map of the whole area. Here's the Civic Center. Here's Harrison Avenue. This is Casey Street here. This is the KOA, Butte Chamber of Commerce. So our plan carries all the way from behind the Civic Center down through this area. This is called Northside Tailings. This area here is called Diggings East. And I don't know if we have a name for this one here. But our plan would envision a meandering creek starting at Texas Avenue, going all the way through here when the Parrot tailings have been removed. It's a straight shot here. This is private land. And then continuing on through this area of north side, and then Diggings East with a huge meandering area. The colors of the blues here indicate water depth, and then onward to the confluence with current Blacktail Creek. In these areas, there's food courts, there's parking areas, there's playgrounds for children. This building here, we'll show a little schematic of it, but it was suggested we have a heritage site for historical mining activity here, and in conjunction with restoration work here at Tech, we could maybe put a little lab out there and see it in progress. And there would be lots of trees and areas to plant new grasses, trees, etc. Next, please. This is just a blow up of the Civic Center area where you can see more of the details. There was an auditorium suggested here, but it basically follows the old creek bed that it's currently in right now. Next. Again, at Northside Tailings, this is the Old Columbia Plaza, and this would be where that building would sit. Next. This is the largest area, and again, we'd have this building straddling the creek, and parking areas, playgrounds, more parking areas, but amenities so that people can enjoy. There'd be covered bridges or covered areas for picnicking. Next, please. And this is the rest down to Montana Street. Montana Street really needs a pedestrian overpass here so we can get over to the other side of the street. Next. The plan here also, as believed from the beginning, envisions a liner here because they're going to take the tailings out. The groundwater is contaminated, so any water that's in here can't be in contact with the existing groundwater. There would be riparian areas, wetlands, and then trees and other sorts of grasses. Next, please. We'd also like to see contours, not just a flat land. We'd like it to be contoured and somewhat hilly and have the associated trees and things with it. Next, please. This is an artist's rendition of what it might look like, looking somewhere down around Cow Avenue towards the east. Excuse me. Next, please. And this is a cutout of, basically, I can't really read that real close, but and I'm not an expert on plants and trees like you guys are, so. But there would be dry soil wildflowers up here, moist soil trees, wet soil grasses, moist soil wildflowers, dry soil wildflowers, and dry soil grasses. So that area, especially that needs to be restored with native grasses. Next, please. We would envision ponds for fishing that the children could throw a line in and try to catch, and flowing water is important. Next, please. Another visual of what it might look like a little bit further east with the covered areas to rest in, and both paved and gravel walkways. Next, please. There we could, it depends how much you could put in here, but there's areas for signage, an outdoor theater, educational resources along the way. These happen to be cores from the pit. Next. This is one where you can use, again, put down where you can charge your iPhone or iPad and through electricity here. Next. This would be a schematic view behind the Civic Center of what it could look like versus what it looks like now. It's a little cartoonish, but it's better than the shops that we have there now. So, next, please. This would be an artist's rendition of that building for the Heritage Site, where you could have historical mining exhibits as well as maybe a restoration lab. Next, please. We believe, as in the end here, that this is really a community-led process, and that's, I think, the important thing to leave with you, that we are trying to represent what the community wants and influence the government to make that happen. And we are working with the EPA, State of Montana, Butte Silver Bowl, to try to make sure that happens. Next, please. These are just some slides of the pictures from the various meetings we've held, both on our tours and our meetings in the various buildings. Next. These are some of our supporters that are behind us. I won't go into all of those. Next, please. So what has happened since we presented this document? As Northey mentioned, we've obtained over 3,500 signatures in favor of pursuing this Headwaters vision, and we presented this to all of the parties prior to them coming out with a work plan. The EPA et al. Has agreed to a proposed path forward for a resolution of the priority soil site, which includes removal of the tailings in the remainder of the Silver Bowl corridor. The parrot is coming out, and I see Pat Canine back there. Raise your hand, Pat. He's kind of working on that. And there's been workshops that we've held with Butte Silver Bowl, ARCO in the state on other things. The removal of the parrot has begun. MR has announced that they said water could be made available for discharge through their water treatment plant when they start treating the water at the pit, either at Texas Avenue or at the confluence at Montana Street. And ROC still believes in its vision of a flowing waterway in the corridor, ultimately. Next. That's it. Yeah.